Good day, students. The subject we are having is biology. 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 That is the subject. And the topic before us is respiratory system in mammals. Respiratory system in mammals. That is the topic. Respiratory system in mammals. Now, under respiratory system in mammals, what are we expected to know? There are some things that we are expected to know under respiratory system in mammals, and that is what we call learning objectives. Our learning objectives, these are the objectives that we have to bear in mind as we continue in the lesson. These are the things that we are supposed to know. Now, what are the learning objectives that we are supposed to know under this topic? One, you must be able to define respiration. That's the first thing. You must be able to define respiration. Define respiration. Also, you must also be able to state the differences between respiration and breathing. You must be able to state the differences between respiration and breathing. That is the second learning objectives. And as we move on in the lesson, we'll also be referring to some of these learning objectives. Now let's look at our third learning objective. The third one, you must be able to explain briefly respiratory system. You must be able to explain briefly respiratory system. And the fourth learning objective is that you must be able to identify the parts of human respiratory system and their functions. You must be able to identify the parts of human respiratory system and their function. And still on learning objectives, the fifth one here is that you must be able to describe briefly the mechanism of human respiratory system. The mechanism of human respiratory system. So you have 5 objectives to learn this afternoon. And our ability to be able to understand this objective will determine to what extent that you can understand the topic. Now, apart from the learning objectives, we are also supposed to learn what we call key vocabulary words. Key vocabulary words. What are the key vocabulary words? The key vocabulary words, they are important words that you are likely to come across when you are going through this topic. The key vocabulary words, they will also help you in understanding the topic very well, because the topic is related to our day-to-day activities. There are things we do every day. We respire every day. And of course, when you understand the key vocabulary words, it will help us to understand what is happening to us when we are respiring or when we are breathing. Now, the first key vocabulary word is lung capacity. Lung capacity. Lung capacity. What is lung capacity? The lung capacity simply refers to the total volume of air in the lungs. The total volume of air which we have inside our lungs. We'll see this as we move on in the lesson. The second key vocabulary word here is the tidal air. Tidal air. What is the meaning of tidal air? Tidal air refers to the volume of air entering and leaving the lungs during normal breathing. The volume of air entering, that is the amount of air that comes into your lungs when we breathe, and the amount of air that goes out of the lungs when you also breathe out. So that is tidal air. The other one, the next key vocabulary word, is what's called vital capacity. Vital capacity. What is vital capacity? It's the maximum volume of air which enters and leaves the lungs during forced breathing. That is when we breathe out. When you breathe in and breathe out hard, then that is vital capacity. So the maximum volume of air which enters and leaves the lung during forced breathing is what we refer to as vital capacity. There is another one which is a residual air. Residual air. What is residual air? is the volume of air which remains in the lungs no matter how hard you breathe out. What this is saying is that you don't exhaust the air in the lungs even when you breathe out. Or even breathe out, there will still be some volume of air in the lungs. And this volume of air that remains in the lungs, even when you breathe out, is what's called residual air. Now we also have oxygen depth. What we call oxygen depth. You have to focus your attention on oxygen depth because it has many implications. Now, it is a quick, heavy breathing to take in oxygen in order to oxidize the lactic acid built up in the muscle cells. Now, what are we saying here in terms of oxygen depth? It is highly related to athletics and those and raising animals. Those take part in athletics, those that are running or playing football. You know, they may not have enough oxygen to breathe in, and thereby we have in their muscles we have accumulation of lactic acid because they have to go through anaerobic respiration. And because of this, we have what's called the oxygen depth. So the quick breathing, the quick heavy breathing, which takes in oxygen in order to reduce the amount of lactic acid built up in the muscles, is what's called oxygen depth. Now we also go to another one which is called respiratory quotients, RQ. Respiratory quotient, RQ. RQ is the ratio of carbon 4 oxide produced by an organism during respiration to the volume of oxygen you consumed. It's a ratio. It has a formula. The amount of carbon 4 oxide that have been released, and then all over the amount of the volume of oxygen that you consume will give you the respiratory quotient. Now, having looked at all the key vocabulary words, let's now look at our first learning objective, that is respiration. That is the first learning objective. Respiration. What is respiration? What is respiration? Now, respiration is defined as a metabolic process in organisms. It could be plant, it could be animal, in which organic substances are broken down to simpler products with the release of energy and subsequently used for other metabolic processes. In most plants and animals, respiration requires oxygen, and of course, carbon dioxide is the byproduct. But then let's look at some key vocabulary words here. Like, for example, we talk about organic substances. What are the organic substances? The organic substances, in a simple language, refers to even the food you take in. Maybe the amala, the pounded yam, or the eba, which you have taken into your body. These are the organic substances. They can also refer to as complex organic substances. And then when you talk about ATP, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Energy is always stored in form of ATP. And that is why you have ATP in the front of energy. So energy is being stored in form of ATP. Now, when you take in your organic substance, your food or whatever, and of course you take in oxygen, what will happen is that you break down these organic substances into simple inorganic ones, and then you have energy being released to the cells of the body. And like I said also, in the process, you have oxygen. When you take in oxygen, in the process, you have carbon dioxide being released to the outside as a byproduct, and that is respiration. Now, I will explain respiration. Now let's go to what actually happens during respiration. During respiration, we have the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the body tissues and the environment. That is, when you take in oxygen into the body cells or into the tissues of the body, which of course breaks down the organic substances, you have to breathe. When you breathe out, what will release to the environment is carbon dioxide. Now, the process by which you take in oxygen from the outside, from the environment, into the body, and of course, from your body, you are releasing carbon dioxide to the outside. This is called external respiration. It is called external respiration because actually you have exchange of gases between the body to use and the external environment, and that is why it is referred to as external respiration. Now, I will talk about external respiration. External respiration is not the only form of respiration that we have. But in actual fact, in many animals, the exchange of these gases takes place at respiratory organs. The exchange of gases takes place at respiratory organs. And for example, what is the respiratory organ in man? It is the lung. So the lungs is the respiratory organ in breathing vertebrates. So we have this respiration taking place in the lungs. And not only the lungs, it is also being assisted by respiratory movement. And we'll see how this movement comes up in the subsequent editions of this lesson. But this exchange is what we call breathing. Nevertheless, we should not interchange breathing for respiration. We should not interchange breathing for respiration. Now, respiration. The other time, I said that external respiration is not the only respiration that we have. The other type of respiration that we have is the respiration at the cellular level. Respiration at the cellular level. That is, respiration that takes place in the cells of the body. And this respiration that takes place in the cells of the body is called internal respiration or cellular respiration. It is also referred to as tissue respiration because the exchange of gases actually takes place in the cells of the body. And that is why we refer to that as external respiration. So, students, we have two major types of respiration now. We have talked about external respiration and we have also talked about internal respiration. When we talk about external respiration, we talk about exchange of gases between the cells of the body and the environment. And when we talk about internal respiration, which is also known as tissue respiration, we are talking about the respiration that actually takes place in the cell of the body. So those are the two types of respiration that we have. But we have to take note of an important fact, or for some facts here. And what are the facts? That we should not interchange respiration for breathing. We should not interchange respiration for breathing. The term breathing and respiration are not interchangeable at all. And let's look at it. Breathing, which is also called external respiration, is a form of gaseous exchange between an animal and its surrounding. I've explained this earlier. And respiration itself is a chemical process within cells. Is a chemical process within cells. Is a chemical process within cell. And it is also called cellular or internal respiration. But this afternoon, we are not going to talk about internal respiration because it involves the glycolysis, the Krebs cycles, and the rest. We are not going into details of internal respiration. So this afternoon, we are going into we are going to look at respiratory system per se. We are going to look at respiratory system per se. And when you look at respiratory system, we are going to look at various aspects of a respiratory system. Now, what is respiratory system? We now understand what respiration is about. What is respiratory system? And that is the major topic before us. Respiratory system refers to organs or structures in animals, structures and animals used for the process of respiration. And all these organs and structures that an organism or an animal uses for respiration makes up what we call respiratory system. The organs or structures an animal uses for the process of respiration makes up its respiratory system. Now, looking at the part of human respiratory system, we have the picture of human respiratory system on the board. We are going to pick them one by one. But let me quickly explain that here comes in through the nasal cavity. It passes through the trachea. Then, from the trachea, it goes into the lungs, where it branches through the bronchioles and all other structures there. But let me quickly remind us the actual exchange of gases takes place in the alveoli there. We can see the alveoli there. The actual exchange of gases takes place in the alveoli that we have there. But let's pick all these organs one by one and see the parts that the actual part they take in the respiration. Don't forget we said that organs, and don't forget that we said that the organs or structures organs and structures that an organism or an animal uses for respiration makes up what we call respiratory system. Now I want to look at these organs and structures one by one. We have looked at the picture of the organs and the structures. Now let's see them one by one and let's see the parts they're actually taking in the process of respiration. Now, like I said earlier, that the ear comes in through the nose and the mouth. And when the ear comes in through the nose and the mouth, the warm and moisten incoming ear, the nose and the mouth warm and moisten incoming ear. That's the first thing. And the second thing here is that the nose filters dust and germs from the incoming ear through the ears and mucus. You must have noticed that in your nose, you can look at your friend's nose. Look at each other's nose. You see some hair in your nose. So that is the function that those ears are performing. They actually filter dust and germs so that they will not go into the lungs. So those are the functions of nose and mouth. Now let's see the other organs and let's see what they do. From the mouth or the nose, the air goes into the pharynx. It goes into the pharynx. Now, what is the function of the pharynx here? The pharynx connects the mouth and nose to the gullet. And larynx. Larynx is also known as voice box. That's another name for larynx, voice box. And the other thing that happens there is that the food goes into the gullet while air goes into the trachea. So the air will go straight into the trachea while the food you taken from your mouth goes straight into the gullet. Now, the next organ or structure is the voice box itself, which is the larynx. Larynx is short and is made up of a strong cartilage, very, very short. Air enters the trachea through the larynx. Now from the larynx, it goes into the windpipe. Windpipe is also called the trachea. And of course, as you have seen in the picture the other time, it's made up of a C-shaped cartilage, which prevents it from collapsing. It has a C-shaped cartilage, which prevents it from, we will see it again when we get to exhalation and inhalation. Now, trachea runs from the larynx and divides into right and left bronchi. And it is left and right bronchi that actually goes into the lungs. Now, let's go to the bronchi. The bronchi itself is made up of rings and cartilage. Rings and cartilage. The right and left bronchi leads into the right and left lungs, respectively. They enter into the right and left lungs, respectively. The bronchi branch into bronchioles, smaller bronchioles. They are tinier they are very tiny. They are not as large as bronchi. So bronchioles, they are subset of a bronchi. So the bronchi leads into the ear sac. Ear sac. It leads into the ear sac. And an ear sac is made up of a cluster of alveoli. If you remember, the other time I said the actual exchange takes place in the alveoli. The actual exchange takes place in the alveoli. Now, the lungs itself, which I have been talking about. Now, if you look at the picture here, there is a cage inside here. And inside this cage, you see the lungs. Actually, the ribs protect the lungs. The lungs are inside the ribs. So it's the ribs that protect the lungs. But let's see what the lungs look like. The lungs itself, as we are looking at it, they are spongy, consisting of bronchioles, hair sac, network of blood vessels, and capillary bound together by connective tissues. You may be wondering what network of blood vessels will be doing there. The blood vessels, don't forget that the blood vessels carries oxygen into the lungs. When you breathe in oxygen, the blood takes it and of course takes it to the lungs. Now each lung surrounded by an elastic membrane, and so it can stretch. The lung can stretch. When they take in air, they stretch. When they release the air, they can also they can expand, they can contract. Of course, they can relax, and of course they can contract. Now, that is that about the respiratory structures and respiratory organs. Now let's see what actually happens when we breathe. What happens when we breathe? We have been talking about external respiration, the exchange of gases between the cells of the body and the outside environment, and that is external respiration. We are talking about breathing. Of course, breathing is what many of us are used to. Breathing is what we understand. Whereas, breathing is just the exchange of gases between the external environment and of course and the cells of the body. But the respiration is more complex than that. Respiration goes into what happened to the oxygen that comes into the cell, and how this oxygen is being utilized, and how this carbon dioxide is being given out. But like I said earlier, that we're not going to that detail today. Next lesson, we'll go into that detail. Now let's see what happens when we breathe, that is when we take in air. Breathing or external respiration involves two major processes. The first one is inhalation. Inhalation is also known as inspiration in some textbooks. And the second one is exhalation or expiration. When we talk about inhalation, what are we talking about? We are talking about when you take in oxygen, when you breathe in air that contains oxygen. That's inhalation. And exhalation is when you breathe out. And let's start from inhalation, and let's see what are the changes that takes place in inhalation. And don't forget that I said the other time that when we talk about breathing, exchange of gases, it is also supported by movement. But movement of what? And let's see in a short while. Now, during inhalation, and when you breathe in, we find that the pillar muscle of the diaphragm contracts. Thereby, the diaphragm can flatten out, like I've shown the other time. Now, we also have intercostal muscle contract, thus pulling the ribs upward and forward. The thoracic cavity enlarges, thereby creating low air pressure in the lungs. We have elastic walls of the lungs are pulled out, and air is drawn in through the trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles, which we have seen earlier. Then oxygen now diffuses from the lungs into the blood. And I said that it is the blood that carries this oxygen to the cells of the body. And carbon dioxide will now be taken back through the same process into the external environment. And that is expiration. Now let's go to details of expiration now. And that is exhalation, expiration. When we breathe out, what happens? Now, I've decided to put the two pictures side by side so that we can compare. You can see the position of the rib. During inhalation, rib cage expands as rib muscles contract. You can see the diagram labeled there, which I said will flatten out. But when you come to exhalation, rib cage gets smaller as rib muscles will relax. And of course, you can also see the diaphragm there, trying to assume its normal C shape on the other side there. And then the air can go out. But let's see let's itemize what happened in that picture for our better understanding. Now, during exhalation, that is when we breathe out. That is exhalation. When we breathe out. Now, what happens when we breathe out? Number one, the pillar muscles of the diaphragm relax, as you have seen in that diagram. Thus, the diaphragm returns to its curved position, the C-shaped position. And then the second thing that happened there is that the intercostal muscle relax, thus reducing the volume of the thoracic cavity, as I've shown before in the diagram. Now, let's look at in comparing the two, the inhalation and exhalation. When we breathe out, it's felt that the ear pressure is increased, and that is what actually forces the ear out through the trachea, and of course through the blood into the external environment. So when you breathe out, there are three major things that happens here. Pillar muscle of diaphragm relax, intercostal muscle relax, and then we have ear pressure being increased now to force the air out. And of course, that is exhalation. That is exhalation. Now, before we round up, let's quickly look at the differences between the expired ear and inspired ear. That is, the ear we breathe in and the ear we breathe out. If you look at this table, there is a table here that will show you the picture of what is happening. When you breathe in, you breathe in about 21% oxygen. And when you breathe out 60% of oxygen. The same thing, the carbon dioxide, you breathe in is about 0.03%, but the amount that goes out is about 4%. Nitrogen is stable, the same amount you breathe in that you breathe out. Atmospheric temperature is what you have when you breathe in, but when you breathe out, it becomes body temperature. Then also, humidity is atmospheric humidity when you breathe in, but when you breathe out, you also have the humidity being increased according to the moisture of the lungs. And of course, the air, cold and dry, that is what you take in when you breathe in. But when you breathe out, you have a warm and moist air. And all this explains the process of respiration, external respiration. And of course, like I said earlier, that all the structures and organs that are being utilized for the process of respiration makes up what's called respiratory system. And we have looked briefly at how all these structures and organs are being used to exchange gases between the internal air and the internal environment. And of course, in the subsequent lesson, we'll see what actually happened in the cells, and that is cellular respiration or external respiration. We'll look at detail of that. So this is how far we can go on respiratory system, and I hope you find it very interesting. Thank you, students.